All right, let's jump back in time today.
Way back.
Yeah, over 4,000 years
Wow.
to ancient Mesopotamia.
The cradle of civilization, right?
That's the one, and we got a ton of requests from you guys for this one.
Yeah, ton.
To take a deep dive into one of history's biggest enigmas.
Oh,
A
yeah.
ruler who did what no one had done before him.
Someone who brought everyone together, huh?
Exactly. United the whole region under one banner.
Bringing it all together.
That's right, we're talking about Sargon of Akkad.
Often called the world's first empire builder.
That's right, and to do this deep dive, we've got a whole stack of sources to help us unpack it all.
Inscriptions.
We're talking historical accounts,
Archaeological finds.
even some glimpses into the art and culture of that whole era.
Super cool.
Ready to go back in time?
I am, but it's a bit like, putting a puzzle together and you're missing some pieces.
Oh, how so?
Well, a lot of what we know comes from fragments and texts written like centuries after Sargon was even alive.
So how do we even know what's real and what's legend after all this time?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
And that's what we'll be exploring as we delve into Sargon's world.
Awesome.
Now, one thing we know for sure is that Sargon popped up during a pretty important time in Mesopotamian history.
Yeah, late 3rd millennium BC.
Okay, paint a picture for us.
Okay, so imagine a world where these city-states, each like super independent,
Yeah.
were fighting over all this fertile land between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers.
So it's a lot different than the map we see today.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Constant power struggles, shifting alliances, ambitious rulers. They all wanted to expand their influence. And it was into this world that Sargon was born.
And it all starts in the city-state of Kish, right? Not exactly a name that, everyone knows, but I guess it played a pretty big part in Sargon's rise to power.
Yeah, Kish was a major player at the time, located near present-day Baghdad, actually.
Right.
And this is where Sargon, who, and this is kind of crazy, might have even been a commoner, rose to power.
Really?
Potentially, yeah. It's believed he got there through a combo of alliances and good old-fashioned military might.
Military might.
Yeah.
And speaking of strategy, his adopted name,
Oh, yeah. Shahrukhin,
meaning
legitimate king.
legitimate king, seems like a pretty calculated move, don't you think?
It does, doesn't it? Like, he needed to really solidify his claim to the throne. Maybe his position was contested.
Oh, I see.
Or maybe he just felt the need to really assert his authority, after taking power.
Zero.
The name itself hints at just how complex leadership was back then.
Almost like sending a message.
Exactly. But securing power in Kish, that was just the beginning for Sargon.
Yeah.
His ambitions, they went way beyond the walls of that city-state.
I bet this wasn't exactly a peaceful neighborhood, was it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
To the south was the super powerful city of Udruk,
Okay.
ruled by the pretty formidable Lugal-Zajsi.
And he was another ambitious king, I take it.
Oh, totally, with dreams of expansion.
So a clash was inevitable.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
That clash between Sargon and Lugal-Zajsi, that became a major turning point in Mesopotamian history.
And I'm guessing that's because Sargon won.
He did.
Yeah.
And by doing that, he achieved something that had never been done before, uniting the entire region under his rule.
The entire region. Wow.
Yeah, no small feat. I mean, just imagine the challenges, the logistics, the sheer manpower it took to not only conquer, but to actually hold on to such a huge area.
It's remarkable.
It really speaks to Sargon's strategic thinking and his military prowess.
I mean, he was building an empire,
He was.
but I imagine hold on to power is a lot tougher than getting it in the first place.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Sargon was constantly dealing with threats of rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
From all those city-states he'd conquered,
Right.
each one with their own traditions and power structures. They weren't going down without a fight.
So how did he keep this massive empire together?
Let's just say he wasn't afraid to use force.
Really?
Inscriptions from his reign, they talk about all these conquests, but they also talk about all the uprisings that followed.
So it was a constant battle to maintain stability.
Yeah, it was a delicate balancing act.
And to kind of solidify his power even more, Sargon did something pretty audacious.
He did. He decided to, get this, ditch the traditional power center of Kish. Yeah, and he established a brand new capital city.
Wow, a brand new capital.
Akkad.
Hey, God, why go through all that trouble?
Well, Akkad was more than just a city. It was a symbol, of Sargon's ambition and his vision of a unified empire.
Hmm. So I'm picturing like a magnificent metropolis, something out of like a movie.
Yeah.
But do we actually know much about Akkad? Like, where was it?
Well, that's the crazy part.
What?
Agadi is mentioned in a bunch of later texts, right? And they always describe it as this incredibly wealthy and grand city.
Mm-hmm.
But its exact location, well, it's still a mystery.
A lost city.
It could be buried under modern-day Baghdad.
Wow, a lost city waiting to be discovered.
Imagine that. Incredible.
Potentially holding the key to understanding Sargon's entire reign.
What an archaeological dream.
Right.
But even without, the actual physical remains of the city, we can probably piece together some clues about what Agade's role in the empire was.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Based on those historical accounts, we can make some educated guesses.
Okay.
For one, Agagade was strategically positioned.
Okay.
It was probably at a crossroads of some major trade routes
Okay.
and likely rich in resources.
So it's kind of the heart of Sargon's empire.
Exactly. It was like the economic engine that fueled all of his ambitions.
So we're talking fertile land,
Fertile land.
control of trade routes,
Absolutely.
access to valuable materials like copper and lapis lazuli.
Oh, and more.
Yeah.
I mean, picture this. Ships coming in from as far as the Indus Valley,
Wow.
which back then they called Meluha, Bahrain, or Bilman as they knew it,
Yeah.
and the coast of Iran, Magan.
All dock in at Aga's bustling quays.
That's incredible.
Right. It really shows you just how far Sargon's empire reached and how much economic power he had.
It really does.
It
But
is.
who was in charge of managing all this? I mean, Sargon couldn't have done it all himself, right?
No way. Behind every powerful ruler is a whole network of skilled people.
Uh-huh.
And in Sargon's case, the scribes played a huge role.
Oh, right, those guys. The masters of cuneiform.
Those are the ones,
Nice.
they were the record keepers, the administrators, the
Right.
ones who kept that whole economic engine running smoothly.
I see.
Imagine them, diligently writing down every single transaction, every shipment, every grain of barley.
Essential work, but maybe not the most exciting, huh?
Maybe not, but without those guys, the whole empire would fall apart.
It makes sense.
And we can't forget about the religious institutions.
Oh, right, the temples.
The temple.
Dedicated to all those different gods.
Exactly. They weren't just places of worship.
No.
They were social and economic hubs.
Oh, how so?
They helped redistribute wealth. They stored grain. They even helped resolve disputes.
So picture it. Bustling marketplaces outside these grand temples, priests performing these elaborate rituals,
Yeah.
farmers bringing offerings to, keep the gods happy.
Right. It was this whole tapestry of daily life, all interwoven with religious beliefs.
Fascinating. So it wasn't just about military power for Sargon.
Right.
He had to keep all these different forces in balance, the religious and the secular, to keep things stable.
Exactly. And speaking of influential figures, there's someone else in Sargon's life we should talk about.
Yeah.
His daughter, Enheduanna.
Oh, interesting. What's her story?
She's a pretty remarkable figure.
Okay.
Sargon made her the high priestess of the moon god Nana in the city of Ur.
Hold on. A high priestess. That's a pretty powerful position, especially for a woman back then.
It is, and we have proof.
Oh, yeah.
There's this artifact called the Ketudu's seal.
The to-do seal.
It's a seal impression, right? And it has an inscription that identifies an official who worked for Enheduanna.
Wow. So this little seal gives us a glimpse into how Sargon's administration worked and how important his daughter was.
Exactly, and just like her father,
Yeah.
Enheduanna has become almost larger than life.
Really?
Her story's been told and retold and embellished through generations.
So once again, we're trying to figure out what's real and what's legend.
It's a common thread.
It is, but these stories, even if they're exaggerated, they tell us how people saw these figures, what parts of their lives really stuck with people over time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this blend of history and myth. What about the art from this time? Did Sargon's reign leave a mark on the art world?
Totally. The Akkadian dynasty that Sargon founded, it saw this huge boom in artistic expression.
Like what?
Well, there's this amazing bronze head of an Akkadian king.
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures of that.
It was most likely one of Sargon's successors.
The detail on that thing is incredible. It's almost haunting.
It's really something. The craftsmanship is incredible. From the beard to that intense gaze, it just radiates authority and power.
It really does.
And while that style was really specific to the Akkadian period,
Uh-huh.
it influenced Mesopotamian art for centuries after.
Wow, so Sargon's legacy goes way beyond just military conquests and unifying
Right.
everyone.
His.
It even shaped the artistic vision of the whole region.
Exactly. But his most lasting impact
Yeah.
might be his whole model of centralized rule.
Oh, interesting.
That blueprint was copied by kings and empires for centuries.
He kind of wrote the book on empire building.
In a way, he did. That idea of a unified Mesopotamia ruled from one central power base, it really resonated throughout history.
Yeah.
Centuries later, an Assyrian king even took the name Sargon as a tribute to this guy.
That says it all.
Right.
But before we jump too far ahead, let's take a closer look at the challenges of ruling such a huge empire.
Okay.
What were the pressures Sargon faced, both from within and outside his empire? And how did those pressures shape his reign? We'll tackle those questions when we come back.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Sargon of Akkad.
Now, we've been kind of painting this picture of, this ancient ruler, his conquests, and the challenges of keeping his empire together.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the people who actually lived under his rule.
Okay.
What was everyday life like for, the average person in the Akkadian Empire?
It's a great question, but detailed accounts of daily life back then are pretty rare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But we can kind of gather some clues from, archaeological stuff and later texts.
Okay.
It's like trying to put together a mosaic,
Yeah.
We might not have the whole picture,
Right.
but those little pieces, those tiles, they still tell us something.
Yeah, so what kind of tiles do we have to work with here? What can they tell us about life in Sargon's empire?
Well, we have these economic texts
Okay.
that document trade, the movement of goods, taxes, stuff like that.
Right. So kind of like account ledgers.
Yeah, exactly. And while that might sound boring, those records give us a glimpse into the economic structure of the empire, the types of jobs people had, even the social hierarchies.
Right. So those seemingly boring details can actually be super insightful.
They can?
What about the social structure? Was there like a clear pecking order?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Based on those records and other stuff, we know that scribes, those cuneiform masters,
Great.
they had it pretty good.
Really?
Their literacy, it was a valuable skill back then.
That makes sense.
They were responsible for recording everything, from trade deals to royal decrees.
So they were close to the centers of power.
Yeah, they were basically the gatekeepers of information.
So being able to read and write was like a ticket to influence, a way to move up in society.
Oh, wow.
Were there other paths to influence?
Oh, sure. Merchants, for instance.
Yeah.
They were vital to the economy. They
Right.
kept those goods and ideas flowing, connecting different parts of the empire and beyond.
And of course, you had your artisans, your farmers, your laborers.
All the essential workers.
Yeah, keeping the whole system running.
Keeping it all going.
It's wild to imagine this ancient society,
Right.
all those interconnected lives playing out under Sargon's rule.
It's amazing.
But I also kind of picture it as a pretty strict hierarchy with the king at the very top.
You're right. The king was seen as the ultimate authority, not just politically, but often religiously, too.
Oh, right. We talked about those temples before
Mm.
and how important they were in Mesopotamian society.
Yeah.
So how did those temples fit into all of this?
Temples were like the center of life back then.
Oh.
They weren't just for worship. They were social and economic hubs.
Okay. How so?
They helped redistribute wealth. They stored grain. They even helped settle arguments.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so picture this, bustling marketplaces right outside these huge temples,
Okay.
priests doing all these elaborate rituals, farmers bringing offerings to keep the gods happy. It was this vibrant tapestry of everyday life, all mixed up with religious beliefs.
It's amazing how intertwined it all was.
It is.
Okay, so we've got a sense of daily life, the social structures, the role of religion.
Yeah.
But what about Sargon himself? What kind of ruler was he? How did he see his job as king?
Well, that's where those myths and legends we talked about come in.
Okay.
They might be exaggerated,
Yeah.
but they often reflect the values and beliefs of the people who told them.
So even if they're not completely true, they can still give us some insight into how Sargon was seen by later generations.
Exactly. And a lot of those stories portray Sargon as this, divinely chosen ruler.
A chosen one.
Destined for greatness. It's a common theme in ancient stories. The king as a link between humans and the gods.
Yeah, it reminds me of the mandate of heaven in ancient China.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
The idea that a ruler's power comes from a divine source. So Sargon's rule wasn't just about military power. It was about, projecting this aura of divine right, of being chosen for the job.
Exactly. That connection to the divine was key for keeping things stable, for inspiring loyalty in his subjects.
But even with the gods on his side, I can't imagine ruling an empire as big and diverse as Sargon's was easy.
Oh, it wasn't.
What were some of the biggest obstacles he had to deal with?
Well, like we said before, rebellion was a constant threat.
Uh-huh.
Those city-states he conquered, they never fully bought into the whole Akkadian Empire thing.
They were always looking for a chance to break free.
Yeah, they were always testing Sargon's authority.
So it was a constant struggle to keep everyone in line.
It was a never-ending game of whack-a-mole.
Right. Put down one rebellion, another one pops up somewhere else.
Exactly, and don't forget about the logistics.
Oh, yeah, just the basic stuff.
Yeah, trying to keep communication open, moving troops around, collecting taxes across such a huge territory.
It's got to be a nightmare even today.
It would have been a logistical nightmare, even with a really efficient system.
I mean, imagine trying to run a global company without email, phones, or reliable transportation.
It's mind-boggling.
No wonder Sargon needed all those soldiers.
Yeah, and those soldiers weren't just for show.
Right.
They were the backbone of his power, the muscle and force in his will.
It's a good reminder that empires, even ones led by, these larger-than-life figures, are often built and maintained through force.
It's true. It's important not to romanticize the past.
Yeah.
Those were brutal times.
They were.
And holding on to power often came at a very high price.
And that brings us to an important question.
Yeah.
How did Sargon's reign actually end? Was it, a blaze of glory, a peaceful handoff of power?
Well, knowing that his empire eventually crumbled,
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say it wasn't a fairy tale ending.
Yeah, probably not.
The details of his death are a bit fuzzy.
Okay.
Some later texts say he died in battle.
Leading his troops against another rebellion.
That's one version. Yeah.
Others say he was assassinated, maybe by people who resented him.
It's interesting how even someone as powerful as Sargon, the world's first empire builder,
Yeah.
couldn't escape that cycle of rise and fall.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it?
It is. But what's fascinating is that even after his empire fell apart, Sargon's legacy lived on. It's like we discussed earlier, his model of centralized rule, his administrative reforms, even his name, they continued to inspire rulers for centuries.
It's incredible.
It really shows you how even the most powerful empires eventually fade away, but their ideas, their innovations, they can have a ripple effect that lasts for generations.
It's true. That's what makes studying history so interesting.
It's not just about memorizing names and dates.
No.
It's about understanding the long arc of human experience, how the past shapes the present.
And in Sargon's case, it's also about the power of stories.
Oh, right. We keep coming back to those myths and legends that have kind of grown up around him.
Yeah, they're like echoes of history, distorted but still revealing. Exactly. They give us another way to understand Sargon and his impact.
They do.
And that's where we'll pick up next time.
Sounds good.
We'll dive into those myths and explore what they tell us about Sargon, his empire, and the people who tried to make sense of his legacy.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've been really digging into the life and times of Sargon of Akkad, the world's first empire builder.
We have.
We've covered his conquests, his struggles, even got a glimpse of what daily life was like back then.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has, but as we've kind of hinted at throughout this whole thing, there's another side to Sargon's story.
There is.
One that goes beyond just the historical facts and into the realm of, well, myth and legend.
The good stuff.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to unpack in this final part.
Awesome.
Because who doesn't love a good story, right?
Especially one that kind of blurs the lines between what's real and what's made up.
Exactly. And these stories, they've been passed down for generations.
Yeah.
They're more than just entertainment.
They actually give us a peek into how later societies viewed Sargon.
That's right.
What parts of his life really stuck with him, what lessons they took from his story.
So it's like looking at history through a funhouse mirror, you know? Distorted, but still kind of showing us something real.
I like that analogy. So one of the most famous legends about Sargon is his origin story.
It is a classic tale of humble beginnings and destiny.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay it on me.
All right, so picture this. Baby Sargon, abandoned in a basket, floating down the Euphrates River.
Wow.
He gets rescued by a simple gardener who raises him without any knowledge of his true origins.
But of course, fate has other plans.
It always does.
Sounds kind of familiar, like the Mesopotamian version of Moses and the bulrushes.
It's that classic motif of the abandoned kid destined for greatness. It pops up everywhere.
Yeah, it does. Why do you think that is?
It's that universal fascination with potential, the idea that anyone, even from the humblest beginnings, can achieve amazing things.
Right. So it's not just that he became a powerful king, but he was like a chosen one.
Exactly. Touched by destiny.
It adds a whole other layer to his story.
It does. It elevates him, you know? Make it seem like his rise to power wasn't just ambition or luck. It was meant to be.
Part of a bigger plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the abandoned baby turned king. What other legends are there about Sargon?
Well, there's one about how he built this incredible temple for the goddess Ishtar.
Oh, Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and fertility.
That's the one.
Pretty fitting for a king known for both his military achievements and his ambitious building projects.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this temple, they say, it was so grand, so over the top, that it attracted people from all over. It basically turned Akkad into this, like, global center of wealth and culture.
So it was like building one of the ancient wonders of the world, a symbol of power and prestige.
Exactly. These stories, even if they're exaggerated, they really capture that sense of awe that Sargon's empire inspired.
They paint a picture of a ruler who changed not just the political landscape, but the whole cultural and economic fabric of the region.
He did.
These stories definitely paint Sargon in a positive light.
Yeah.
But are there any that show, a darker side to his rule?
You're right. Not all the stories are about triumph and glory.
Right.
Some hint at the ruthlessness that often comes with ambition.
Okay, like what?
Well, there's this story about how Sargon, in a moment of anger, destroyed the sacred city of Uruk.
Destroyed Uruk.
Wow. And that axe, they say, brought down the wrath of the gods on him.
The classic hubris story.
Yep. Even the most powerful rulers can be brought low by their own pride.
A reminder that even a king, favored by the gods, can go too far and face some serious consequences.
A timeless lesson?
It is, isn't it? Power corrupts.
And absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
But even these darker legends, they make Sargon even more interesting, more complex, more human.
I agree. It's that mix of triumph and tragedy, ambition and vulnerability that makes these ancient stories so captivating.
They resonate even after all these years.
They do.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Sargon's world, I'm left with a sense of wonder, really awe at what he accomplished, but also an understanding of how complex power is and how those very human stories shape history and are shaped by it.
It's a two-way street.
It is, and that's the beauty of exploring the past. It's full of surprises, challenges, and in the end, it helps us understand ourselves and the world a little bit better.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And if you're as fascinated by Sargon's world as we are, we encourage you to check out some of the incredible translations of ancient Mesopotamian texts. They're out there, waiting to be discovered.
They are.
And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into captivating historical topics.